Hello, everybody. Welcome back for the 7th episode of Petty Daydreams, Advice for Modern Women. I thank you guys for sticking around this whole time. It's been so great going on this journey with you, starting a podcast during a pandemic. I wouldn't have it any other way. All the people that encouraged me to start a podcast, I guess you were right, or you saw something about me that I didn't see. This has been almost like a natural transition for me, given my marketing background. I've never done any voice work, but a lot of the tools I've used before have really been integrated into this process, and then just relating with you comes very naturally too. This week, I am alone, just me, myself, no guests, but I do have some very exciting guests coming up. I have 2 guests in August that I think you're really going to like, and one, I think she's going to talk about travel, but the one before that, we're going to talk about cosmetic injections, something super popularized. Today, just me, myself, you, the listener, I'm going to be talking about negative feedback and criticism, and basically how to change our perspective about these things. I put out a poll, and you guys said that you related to this topic, so even though I had already announced the topic, I, wanted to see kind of the baseline of where we were at with this topic. A lot of people said that they needed to think about a way to handle negative feedback and criticism better. No better way to handle it. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Kind of like some science perspective, some of my own personal perspective, and we're going to tackle this thing head on. So thanks for sticking around. The music I'm going to use throughout this episode, as always, is Brightside by Evan Schaefer. And then at the end of the episode, I am going to go ahead and talk about the giveaway that I have coming up. That's what I'm going to do today. So stick around, listen to the whole episode. As always, you can find me on Instagram, Petty Daydreams. While you're listening to the show, take a screenshot, tag me. I'd love to see what you think. And if you ever need to find another way to get in contact with me, just send me a message or send me an email at pettydaydreams@gmail.com. And go ahead and, if you enjoy this episode, leave me a review on Apple. Let's get right into it then. Okay, so like I said previously, the topic for today is going to be receiving and handling negative feedback and criticism in the best way possible. So a lot of people prickle at the idea of being given negative feedback or having their work criticized. It's a totally natural reaction. I actually found some very interesting research that was talking about negative feedback. I found this Inc. article, and it was basically like, science says we're wired to fear criticism, so fix it with these 6 tips. I was doing some research for this episode, and I came across this fact. So it says, studies show we're 4 times more likely to remember negative criticism than praise. And that's true even among happy people. And that bad feedback is processed more thoroughly than good. And then it also said that it takes experiencing 5 positive events to make up for the psychological effect of just 1 negative event. So if you're anything like me, I'm actually, some people will say I have a strong personality. Don't really know what the fuck that means. We'll say I have a strong personality, or maybe they'll say that I've gotten so many comments about my personality in the past. But people will say all these things about you, but on the inside, I'm very sensitive. Anytime I get negative feedback, whether it's coming from a place that's a place where I respect and okay, I don't like what I'm hearing, but I'm going to actually listen to you. Or it's coming from somewhere like some idiot is just, commenting on a Facebook post and talking about things they don't know me, I don't know them. But anytime I get any kind of negative feedback, I think about it so freaking much. I think about, is that accurate? Like, is that how I really am? Is that how I come across? I'm kind of obsessed with making sure that what I'm meaning is getting across to people, about being precise with my words, precise with the things that I do, so that there's no room for interpretation. Although that's kind of foolhardy, because anything you say, anything you do is going to be interpreted differently by your audience. As good communicators, what we should be doing is trying to be as clear as possible. But that's never 100% the case. But I'll think about what they're saying, and I'm always like, is that true? Do I need to change what I'm doing? I feel bad about it. I'm like, oh my God, I wonder if I really wasn't being clear enough. I wonder if I'm really not working hard enough. I wonder all these things. So I think we all, in some place, and all these articles I found, this is kind of like a universal human thing. We all have this reaction, this reactivity when we hear anything that is slightly critical about who we are, or what we're doing, or something we did. I'm going to kind of walk you through understanding this whole reaction in your brain, this negative feedback thing, and then kind of finding ways to handle it better. I found that it's really hard to figure out what negative feedback to pay attention to in a digital world. We are increasingly digital. Now we're all either working from home or working remotely, or some people are still public facing. But, we've kind of regressed into this point where we're not seeing people face to face. We all know the challenges that come from that. Things are misinterpreted. They can be, come across as a certain tone when that's not necessarily what we meant, because we're condensing down the many nuances of human communication into text on a screen. There's things like trolls. There's things like actual, critical people that, maybe we should listen to what they're saying. Other people are just, there are people out there that will always just, latch on to your positivity, to your creativity, to your uniqueness, and they're always going to find something wrong with it. So we have all of these things. And being online, having a public profile, being some kind of creative or content creator, even just being online, we're just opened up to this floodgate of criticism. And everybody thinks they're a critic. And that's kind of also the thing. Who do you decide to give authority to give you feedback, to give you criticism? Because we can't just, through this process say, I'm only going to receive positive feedback. That does not make us grow. That does not make us better. That does not make us more inclusive, more aware of our own privilege. We have to be able to listen to opinions other than our own without having that reactivity. That, you've got to get past that initial reactivity of, no, you're wrong. That's not what I meant, or that's not what I did, or you just don't get me. We have to get past that, and we have to find a way to decide who should we listen to and who we shouldn't. People that are constantly trolling you, people who are just constantly negative, those are the kinds of people that, maybe you read their negative feedback, but really don't let it get under your skin. People will also come at you with a very emotionally charged message saying, you're wrong, or you're being small-minded, or you're being this or that. Even if those things aren't true, we're always going to read through it. We're going to have some kind of emotional reaction. But you've really got to find a way to turn off the tap. That saying, you're letting somebody take up free rent in your mind. That's those kind of people. They're always going to latch on to everybody. They're always going to try and have something negative to say. You've got to find a way to filter out those opinions. Then there are positive people that give negative feedback. These are the kinds of people you want to listen to. And I'm not talking about just people whose opinions you value and trust, because our friends can sometimes be big proponents of this toxic positive feedback. people who keep us in our echo chambers, people who tell us that every move we're making is a good thing. You don't really want yes men completely enclosing you and encapsulating you in your life. There are people that you should listen to and take into account what they're saying. I think we've all learned through this whole big resurgence and worldwide ignition of this Black Lives Matter, equity movement and just like this racial awareness movement, that sometimes we are falling into pathways and methods of behavior and stuff like that that aren't necessarily good. But if we were able to just go unchecked, it's not their responsibility to tell you you're wrong. But if we were able to just go unchecked, people would just keep doing the same shit they're doing. A lot of that is also educate yourselves, guys. There's so many resources now more than ever on checking your own privilege and becoming aware of the kind of systems you've upheld passively, actively. So this is like a very good example of taking into account negative feedback from your environment and maybe from other people and going, I can learn, I can be better. I think another example of this is, feedback at work. We hate to hear it, but sometimes you will make a mistake. I think if we operate from a place where we know that we're flawed, that we're going to make a mistake, it helps the perfectionists of those out there, like me, to realize that those things are inevitable. But when you have, somebody of authority over you and they're well-meaning, they're fair, that's somebody you should listen to. If your goal is really to get higher up in your job or to make yourself more marketable for a future job, maybe you should listen when you get like your performance report or when you put something out there for your work and it falls short of where the guidelines should be or where the standards are. Maybe it's time to listen and hear how you failed in some way. I don't really think that's a failure, so to say, but hear how you can improve. So there's kind of all these different streams of feedback that we get. And you've just kind of got to possess this higher emotional intelligence and maturity. And that really just comes through either natural ability, how you were raised, or learning and practice. So when you have people in your sphere, yes men, you've got to think about how you're taking in their feedback. If you really crave that constant positive feedback, maybe you've got to put yourself into some different social groups so that you can expand yourself outwards. Find areas of weakness where you can grow. Find a mentor. Find somebody that's going to hold you accountable. I would say that if you have a lot of yes men around you, that you're doing something wrong. I mean, maybe you feel more comfortable that way, but really growth comes from this sense of being uncomfortable and seeing where we measure up in the world. But any kind of feedback that you receive, you're going to have an emotional response. So I said, you want to have this emotional intelligence, maturity, patience maybe, in order to improve this part of yourself and this part of your communications skill set. How do we feel initially? I feel bad. I responded to some negative feedback the other day as best I could. And this is also part of my job. Sometimes people get negative reviews. Sometimes people get somebody who's just mad about something, like you've done everything you could please them, and they're still unhappy. So in my work, digital marketing and stuff like that, sometimes you get these people. So finding a way to craft a professional, mature response is all part of the same thing. So first, you want to take account of your emotions. You feel bad, okay? You hate that somebody thought you weren't doing a good job, or they think something's wrong with your personality or your character, any of these things. So get your emotions in check. How do I feel? What is my initial course of action that I want to take? Maybe write that down. You're probably not going to want to pursue your first course of action. Oftentimes, our first course of action in response to negative feedback or criticism is defensive. To be on our defenses, to be like, well, no, actually, you're wrong. I actually didn't say that. All these different things are just blocks in our communication abilities. You want to take account of your emotions, and then the next thing you want to do is go, well, let's break down what they said. What are the things in here that could be true? Maybe write those down on one half of the paper, and then on the other side, write down the things you don't think are true or are not accurate, and then dwell on it. Look at those two sides of the paper. And then when you feel like you've returned to a emotional state that's more calm, that's ready to tackle this, go ahead and think about what you want to say in response. I do not think that in your response to negative feedback or criticism that it should be defensive. I think that's really our instinct, is to be defensive. I think we should see it as more like, I am trying to come from a place where I'm trying to clear up maybe this potential miscommunication, and not from here's how you're wrong and why. So even if you didn't do anything wrong, or maybe you feel like you didn't do anything wrong after that little exercise with the two sides of the paper, always come from a place of humility. Say, I'm sorry that I did this or that. Or maybe say, I can see where you're coming from. And then say, I'm taking into consideration these things you said. I see now that I could have done this better. I could have, I could have been more calm, or I could have been more level-headed. I see where I failed in the past. I see where I failed in this situation. Take account of those things and own your own misgivings, your own short-sightedness, etc. Because we all have blind spots in our personality, in our work, things like that. And then say, I appreciate you. In response to trolls and stuff like that, I honestly feel like unless it really requires addressing in the public sphere, wherever they're sending you stuff, unless it really requires addressing, the best thing to do is not to respond. I have been practicing this with my negative relationship I've developed with Facebook and with some people on there, and it has made me feel better. Not everything is worthy of a response, but we need to be able to tell the difference. Because when there's positive negative feedback, that's like the best way to phrase it, we are being given the opportunity to grow and to see ourselves from somebody else's eyes. But in other cases, and make sure too, like sometimes people say something that we don't necessarily agree with, but they're saying it in a respectful way. Don't block those people. Unless it's really bothering you. Like if they're posting on every single thing you post and they have some negative comment or something, there's a difference between those people and the people that are wanting to start a dialogue and have a constructive conversation. Maybe those people are worth responding to some of the time, but you've also got to think about conserving your own energy. And I also thought it was really interesting. I was reading another article from Greatest, and it was a 2018 study with some undergraduates, and it said that there are some important requirements for negative feedback to be constructive. And that's the whole goal also, guys. When you're giving negative feedback and criticism, keep these things in mind. So, first of all, it's got to be compassionate. So, give criticism in a way that indicates care for the recipient, and it should come from someone that the recipient respects. And then be specific. So criticism should target the appropriate elements of the recipient's performance and offer specific guidance for improvement. And then it's a match. So criticism should align with the recipient's emotions and motivation. So when you're giving feedback, you want to make sure you keep those things in mind, because if you're just giving feedback or receiving feedback that's almost like there's no goal for the interaction, maybe you should reconsider why you're giving feedback in the first place. Or maybe you should consider their motives. And that's something we should think about too. Deciding if the feedback is constructive or destructive. I always say haters are going to hate. Those people know. Psychologically, the people that are constantly at your neck, there's a lot of reasons why these people do it. Envy, narcissism, insecurity. In order to grow, you need to develop your emotional intelligence. So, be aware of your own thoughts, your own mindset, your own actions anytime you have these kind of interactions. And think about why. Why are you giving feedback? Why is the other person giving feedback? What is their emotional state? Or have they been stressed this week and maybe they're looking for somebody to lash out at? Which, if this is happening consistently, maybe you need to talk to HR. Maybe you need to disengage. But part of being a good communicator and growing this side of yourself is being able to have this empathy and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And so maybe if they're just coming up with something they want to critique you on because they're upset or something, give them time. I bet they'll apologize and say, actually, I wanted you to specifically do this in this area of improvement. Here's how I can walk you through it, etc. So you want to be keeping these things in the balance. And don't be afraid of negative feedback or criticism. Like I said, it's an inevitable part of life. And like this whole change from COVID and this pandemic, we've got to start working our way through the various stages of grief. And part of life is trauma. Part of life is grief, expectations, love, money, career, etc. We have to learn how to let go of certain things and open ourselves up to certain things. So I hope this has really given you some food for thought. These things are inevitable. It's a part of life. I think the sooner we start tackling it and maybe thinking about our own negative behaviors, our own reactivity, we really are serving ourselves. Because the easier it is to communicate with others, the easier it is to be understood or to understand, the better off we are as humans. Because what we really desire is to be close to one another and to be valued and loved and to have purpose. So if you have any thoughts on negative feedback or criticism, I would love to hear from you. Maybe we can touch on this in the future. I have lots of art friends. I think it'd be interesting to hear from their perspective because I know receiving criticism in art school, that was part of the process. You've got to learn how to be open to it and to learn from it. So maybe having an artist on or maybe somebody else, a public figure, would be illuminating to hear how they deal with negative feedback and criticism. If you know of anybody, send me an email, pettydaydreams@gmail.com. Next, we're going to give some advice to somebody. I hope you find something to take away from that. So hang on. I'm going to have the advice section coming up in just a second. Okay, friends, welcome back, and here's the advice segment, hitting you hard. Today, we're going to be giving some relationship advice. And like I say, I am not an expert. I have a basic bachelor's degree. I am a basic bitch. No, I'm just kidding. Essentially, I give advice as if you were my best friend sitting right in front of me. Sometimes it's going to be good. I would like to think I give great advice. Sometimes, maybe you'll disagree with me, but I hope we can have that dialogue in a healthy way, and maybe we can both grow from the experience. But I think in terms of relationships, I've had quite a few, and I've been living with my boyfriend, partner, over a year. We've been all together almost 2 years this September. So I've had other relationships, long distance relationships with fuckboys, entanglements, whatever. I hate that people are talking about entanglements now. Like, that's not really a thing, but I can understand, it's a new term. I think most people would commonly call that like a tryst or an affair. But I've kind of been across the whole spectrum and I've dated a ton. So I feel like I'm equipped to talk to this listener today. So I'm going to read their advice query. Okay. So they say, my advice request is twofold. My partner and I have been together for a while and have been friends for most of our lives prior to dating. I love him with my whole heart. He is my person, my lobster, and I know we will get married someday in the not too far future. We are moving in together and I would love some advice on living with your significant other. I would also love some advice on integrating our families and coming together as our own family. We both have very different backgrounds, family dynamics, and cultures. We both love each other's families, but I worry sometimes about how our different upbringings will affect our relationship. The parents haven't met, but there's also a language barrier there. Being of different cultures and races, I also have a lot of anxiety about his family truly accepting me and not treating me like an outsider. Moving forward together, I want to honor and show love to both of our cultures and upbringings. I just have a lot of anxiety in general about this, but I truly know down in my core that he and I are meant to be. That has never been a doubt. Okay, so I think we should touch on the first thing. You said you guys are moving in together and you would love some advice on living with your significant other. So moving in together is a big step. I think it's not as big of a step as it was for our parents. A lot of people would say they were living in sin or it was like ungodly or this or that. I have talked to my grandma about this. I mean, when I moved in with my boyfriend, it was kind of one of those things like I was sick of living with shitty roommates. I've had also really good roommates, so you guys know who you are. But I was sick of living with roommates, not having my voices respected. There's so many dynamics when you're living with roommates versus living with a significant other. And his lease was going to be up. It was a few months later, so there was a little bit of a compromise there when he moved in. But I was talking to my grandma, and she said she wishes she could have lived with the men she married before she did, because it reveals this other side to people. It really does. And I've talked about this before. You didn't say, your respective gender identities or your sexuality or sexual orientation, but if you are a woman, and sometimes this dynamic comes into play between homosexual couples, but more so in heterosexual couples, you have this dynamic can sometimes emerge where women are doing a lot of the emotional labor, this invisible labor, which is basically this idea of, keeping track of things in your mind. So like, I see that the laundry detergent is half empty. We're going to have to buy that in 2 weeks. Making lists of groceries that we're going to need. Making, activity plans or schedules for the kids and schedules for the husband, schedules for your social calendar with your husband or a significant other. Sorry. So women are sometimes fall into this pitfall where things are expected of us when we move in with people. A good way to gauge how much of this dynamic will come into play or if you can overcome this dynamic is by living together. Like, for my grandma, she's a different generation, but a lot of boomer men are so incapable of, like, taking care of themselves. Obviously there are exceptions, guys, and obviously this isn't like, I'm making a huge blanket statement, but anecdotally and from things I've learned through, reading articles and stuff, boomer men always had a wife to cook and clean for them, sew, wash their clothes, take care of all the kids while they went to work, all these things. So she said it was a good thing, and I think it is a good thing to live with people before you get married or move on in whatever else phase. I don't think we need to see it as like this checklist thing though. Like plenty of people go ahead and get engaged and then get married and then they live with each other. But it can have benefits and it can have, I don't know, are there really any cons? Maybe if you see this as like a test to your relationship, I don't think that's a positive way to do this. So avoid that kind of mentality. If you're like, oh, we should move in together, see if it will work out, I think you have bigger problems at play. So living with your significant other, I would say, things to do. Think about communication. You probably already know. You guys have known each other most of your lives prior to dating. So you've probably worked out a lot of your communication kinks. But moving in together, you're going to be around each other more often. And you're also going to be in each other's space more often. So think about ways you can improve your communication with each other. I would recommend getting some books. Love Language book. I think that's Gary Chapman. Getting some books just on general communication, looking into each other's personality types, seeing potential clashes that might come, doing these kinds of things to get ahead of any potential problems, and just to make yourself a better communicator in your relationship, in all of your relationships. Because you're going to have differences of opinion over stuff. And this is true of any relationship. Unless you're like clones of each other, which that can create its own problem. But like everybody is going to have some kind of conflict in their relationship at some point. And being able to argue in a positive way, like having a goal for the end of your argument, because arguments come about from some kind of need or some kind of discrepancy, something like that. So you've got to think about, what is my intention when I'm, saying, hey, I'm tired of you coming to the house with dirty shoes, or whatever it is. Sometimes issues are much bigger than that. But think about, if you want to stay together, you say this is your lobster, obviously you want to stay with this person. Think about how you both, so your partner needs to be an active participant in this too. Think about how you can be effective communicators. Also, other things to do. Discuss who's going to be taking care of what in the household. This is recommended for any partnership. People moving in together, roommates even, just people we're not intimate with. Talk about who's going to be doing what. When you lay out the expectations from the beginning, it makes it so much better. When you can say, when you're not having somebody do guesswork to figure out what you want, or maybe you start resenting them because they do the same thing that you hate, or they neglect the same chore and it really annoys you. You want to avoid those things. So maybe sit down and discuss. You say you guys want to get married. Sit down and discuss your expectations. Talk about, I'm going to be doing the grocery shopping and stuff. Is that fine with you? Or maybe they want to do the grocery shopping. Talk about who's going to be doing what. And then talk about how often you'll clean the house together. Also, traditional dynamics sometimes work, if that's okay with you. If one of you wants to do all the cooking and stuff and one of you wants to do all the outside stuff, we tend to fall into these like gender normative things, and we don't have to. But if that's what you want, that's perfectly fine. But just having these discussions will help you. And then other things like talk about finances. When you live with your significant other, you really learn how much they shop on Amazon, which, I'm not a really big fan, but I sometimes, whatever. But you see how often they shop on Amazon, or you see they go through 5 gallons of milk every month. Stuff like that you didn't know when you didn't live with them. And you want to talk about like, hey, are we going to split the bills? Are we going to split the rent? Or is it going to be proportionate? Some people have that kind of setup and it really works for them. And then talking about like your planned finances for the future. If you're going to have a wedding, how are you going to save for it, etc. Those are good things to do. And then your other concern was that integrating your family may be difficult. Different backgrounds, dynamics, cultures. I don't think you should be worried about being seen as an outsider. You guys, when you get married, or even now, you're creating your own family. It's this active thing. And you're going to make your own family. You're forging a future. Genetically, perhaps. Legacy, etc. So I wouldn't worry about being an outsider. Either they accept you, or you work on being accepted by them, or you make your own way. And you know you're going to be accepted by your significant other. And that's your family. That's what matters most, honestly. Because you can have, like, mother-in-laws or parent-in-laws that have an issue with you, or maybe they think that, you know, you guys aren't a good pair, or whatever. Maybe they're just going to cause issues for you. Really, at the end of the day, that stuff doesn't matter. Having people prop up and support your marriage, support your relationship, that's very important. But if you can't have it, there are other places to receive that kind of support and community foundation. The big thing, like I said before, is communication. When you come from different backgrounds, there's going to be some clash. And you said, you know, different cultures, that is going to be kind of a culture shock kind of thing. Like, there are going to be some differences of opinion about how to celebrate holidays, which holidays, stuff like that. And then if you inevitably have children, that's probably going to be more of a concern then, because our parents really like to dictate how we handle our children and like what traditions are important, etc., because they feel like your children are part of their legacy, like this kind of ownership almost over your destiny just because they made you, which isn't necessarily true. But grandparents love to have an opinion. So it'll probably come into more play then, but I really wouldn't worry about it. Because, you know, this is your person. You are deeply in love with them. They're deeply in love with you. I think you guys can overcome any challenge you're going to face. If you work on your communication, if you admit when you're wrong, if they admit when they're wrong, these things are vice versa. If you are capable and you both want to stay together and that is your goal and you love each other, you guys are going to make it through anything. So this anxiety you have, think about why you have this anxiety and find some ways to quell that anxiety. And I think you can quell that anxiety by understanding that your partner's not going anywhere, you're not going anywhere. Your relationship is going to, stand the test of time. Rely on your partner. Talk about these insecurities and these anxieties. And have faith in your partner. Trust your partner. Because knowing that they're there is going to make the rest 10 times easier. I really wish you guys luck with your relationship. If you have any specific questions about living together or some kind of conflict comes up, send me an advice request. Let's talk about this more. I'm really excited that you're taking this step. Living together is really great. I love having my boyfriend here. I love getting to cook for him and cook together and experience life in a more, encapsulating way where we're on top of each other for good or bad during a pandemic. I've been really grateful that the times that I've been able to be home with him when we both work from home. And I think that you'll see that, and you know this, that your partnership is one of those things that you know you can rely on and trust. And all through life's hardships, it really helps to have somebody to tell you when you're wrong, to keep you in check, to give you that negative feedback I talked about in the first part of this episode, and to help you grow and be your best person. And then you guys make something unique and beautiful together. So good luck on moving in together. I think you guys are going to love it. And you're making your own family one way or another. And I actually think you'll be surprised, learn to navigate difficulties together and with communication strategy. Thanks for trusting me with giving you advice on this. If you are somebody listening out there and you have an advice request, literally nothing is off limits. Relationships, social media, digital marketing, having a dog, etc., so on and so forth. Like, I'm here to give advice on any topic. If I don't know what to give advice on for a certain topic, I'm going to do some research and maybe I'll give you my opinion. Or maybe I'll say, hey, I got this request and I'm a fish out of water. I don't freaking know. So don't ask me questions about physics, please. Anyway, thanks for trusting me. I have my advice request form linked on my Facebook page, linked on my Instagram, which is Petty Daydreams. You can always send me an email. to pettydaydreams@gmail.com, or you can send me a DM. I'll never share your identity. I've been, with all these requests, I don't know who the frick you are, guys. I'm like, who could this be? This could be anybody. So, trust me, I'm here for you. I really enjoy being able to leverage some of my knowledge and some of my wisdom. Even though I'm not at the end of my journey, I'm not the most wise person ever, I like being able to help you with anything you're going through. So I'm going to go on to the hot takes and close this puppy up. Stick around. And now, hot takes with Bobbie of Petty Daydreams. I'm going to keep it quick for you guys because this episode's already going on a little long. I had this submission for a hot take today, and I think you're going to love it. So this was somebody on Facebook. Apparently, he's a candidate for Congress in Florida. And, this is a public profile. His name is George Buck, so he's running for Congress. So here's his post. Some volunteers asked to meet me with them the other day outside Starbucks. I went, and I was not wearing a mask, but was standing 6 feet from the entrance. I was also wearing my 101st Airborne hat. While I was waiting outside, not even in their store and 6 feet away, they came out and told me I have to leave the premises. They didn't give me a reason why, but I think it was because I am a veteran. So I decided to come back with my Dunkin' Donuts cup to let them know where I stand. Guys, if you're going to buy coffee, don't buy Starbucks. They hate our gun rights, they support Marxism, I wish, and they kicked a veteran off of their premises. Buy Dunkin' Donuts, no Starbucks, Buck 2020. He's not wearing a mask, guys. Everybody knows Starbucks' policy on masks by now. I don't get this, faux outrage from people. But he's, proudly standing there with his Dunkin' Donuts cup outside of a Starbucks. He's got his hat on. Yes, he's a veteran, which I respect. But he's not wearing a mask. What does he expect? Maybe he was standing too close to the door or something. I hate having to navigate around people standing outside of places who aren't wearing masks. So I'm kind of glad they did it. But, he thinks it's because he was a veteran? No, dude, you're not wearing a mask. Stop with this faux outrage, you created this situation and you're just gonna get mad at it. I see this often. People create a situation and then they get mad at the results. Not wearing a mask to a store just so you can record yourself or record the response. Every company is putting out policies. If you don't want to wear a mask, go somewhere where you don't have to wear a mask. But also think about the fact that you're freaking exposing workers to your germs just because you want to go freaking have a bottle of wine or go to Applebee's or something. Be empathetic, care about other people. I don't live in Florida, but I'm not going to vote for this guy. I would hope they wouldn't either, because Florida is bursting at the seams with COVID cases. Anyway, that's my hot take for the week. Thanks for the submission, friend. And that's it. So, thanks guys for listening. Leave me a positive review on Apple if you love it. Share with your friends. Details about the giveaway coming out soon on my page, my Instagram page, probably this weekend. Pay attention and enter to win. If you also saw this post or you see any kind of posts that you think would be great, send me an email, pettydaydreams@gmail.com. I may make my own form on Google where you can upload screenshots if that's easier for you. Let me know what you think about that. I am available almost anywhere, so if you like this episode, share with your friends. I can give you a direct link to post on your Facebook page. And if you haven't already followed or liked my Facebook page, not that I really care about that, but if you haven't, maybe it's another good place to keep up to date with stuff. Anyway, hope you guys have a really great week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for getting me to so many listens and downloads so quickly. I'm blown away. I'm so thankful for you. So stay safe and stay petty.